Good afternoon, everyone. This is David Hart, CEO of the Bermuda Business Development Agency. Welcome to the Bermuda Angle webinar. We have a really special guest and dear friend of mine joining us from Florida today, Speaker of the House of Florida, Paul Renner. Speaker, welcome to Bermuda. Welcome to our webinar. I'm going to give you a proper introduction and maybe introduce why we're gathered today. But we're delighted to have you with us to speak to the Bermuda market. You know, in Bermuda, we pride ourselves on being the risk capital of the world. And so we've gathered 50-something of the leaders and executives in Bermuda's reinsurance space to be on our webinar today and hear directly from you an update on how Florida's special session on insurance went. This was the second special session on insurance of the year. It was December 12th through the 16th. Congratulations to you and your colleagues in the House and your partners in the Florida Senate for what you accomplished. I think you went a long way towards stabilizing Florida's insurance market and curing some of the challenges we've been facing for some time in Florida. And so I congratulate you. And I welcome you to this opportunity to speak directly to the Bermuda marketplace. Such a special relationship between Florida and Bermuda. And I've learned along my journey that Florida is Bermuda's largest trading partner because of the relationship between Florida's insurance sector and Bermuda's reinsurance sector. But I've also learned along the way that when Florida is hit by a hurricane, the reverse is true, that Bermuda becomes Florida's biggest trading partner as Bermuda's reinsurance sector helps Floridians and our communities in Florida get back on their feet. And so as a Floridian who works in Bermuda, I cherish this special partnership and relationship. And I wanted to invite you to share some of your thoughts and views on what was accomplished last week and the bill that the governor's now signed into law. Let the Bermuda reinsurance market understand directly from you what you think it'll do to stabilize and secure the market in Florida. And then if there's time, we'll open up a chat feature at the end, Speaker, and see if any members of the Bermuda reinsurance sector have questions for you. Speaker, again, welcome. I'll turn the microphone over to you, sir.
Thank you, David. And it's great to be with everybody. Looking at David's background, I'm a little jealous. It's a dreary day in the Sunshine State today. And to your comment about being trading partners, I know both sides benefit from that trade, but I think both sides would also like to see that trading amount go down a little bit. It's been a little too high on both sides of that ledger. And I think what we did in the special session this last week will begin to set the wheels in motion, set the foundation for a much, much healthier insurance market in Florida, one that is a good risk proposition for people on the call to take. And so I assume many of you have seen news clippings and some briefings on what happened, but we addressed the main culprit, I believe, which is the types of claims that are difficult to adjust and predict, and that is litigation. And I know there are individual insurers that do business in 49 of the states, 50 states, and the one they don't do business in is Florida. And so we really had to get out of a place where we're less than 10% of all homeowners claims, but more than 75% of all litigated claims in the country. And so we eliminated one-way attorney's fees. We eliminated the use of assignment of benefits in the property context altogether, which I think addresses some of the roof claims and other kind of frivolous lawsuits and frivolous claims that plagued our market well before Ian and Nicole and made it weak before we faced those two storms. We shortened the statute of limitations, which has gone now from 5 years for major storms and 3 for convective storms down to 1 year statute of limitations with 18 months for supplemental claims in this last bill. So a lot of major work in the litigation front as well. We're leaning hard toward beginning the depopulation effort of Citizens, which has gone from being our insurer of last resort to frankly first resort and the best deal out there. And that was never, ever the intention. But, politics does what politics does. And now we've got a situation that we have to kind of work our way back out of. And so we made a lot of tough decisions and took, I think, a principled and courageous stand to do what others had not done before, what had been promised but never delivered. And because of that, I think that, again, the foundation has been laid for what I hope is an increase in investment, both at the primary insurance level, but also at the reinsurance level. And really hope to listen more and talk less for part of this call, to hear from you what you think the both short-term, mid-term, and long-term effects will be, because we, in the reinsurance context, put up an amount of money to provide some reinsurance higher up in the tower, just below our cat fund, and yet not all the way down to where the primary insurers have their surplus requirement. So there's a gap there in terms of reinsurance that we're hoping that some or all insurers can fill through the private market. But that's really a conversation that I hope you guys will give me some insights on, about how soon and when that market will turn, and we'll see, again, increased competition, increased capacity in response to some of the work we did this last week.
Speaker, I'm mindful that you and I first met when you were elected to the Florida House in 2015, and we've been friends some 7 years now, and it was really exciting to see you be elected as Speaker and finally in that chair, and that we had such a great alignment in Florida between you, your partner across the other end of the building in Senator Pasadomo to be Senate President, and Governor DeSantis, all aligned around a philosophy of what can you do to improve the private market. And for all three of you to be taking that approach of what steps should be done in Florida to strengthen the private market, shrink the size of Citizens so that Floridians weren't on sort of on the fiscal hook for that pool of risk. And that you took the steps we've long advocated for to finally do something about Florida's litigation abuse climate. I'm really pleased with what I've seen in the bill, and I congratulate you. I guess I want to let our audience know, if you have a question for Speaker Renner, you have a comment section on the right hand of your screen. You're welcome to type in a question for Speaker Renner, and he should be able to see it, but if for some reason he can't, I can read those to him. So I'll invite our guest at any time to use that comments feature to ask a question if you have any. And I've known Speaker Renner's very, very good on his feet, so he's capable of asking the easy ones and the hard ones. But as he said, he might be interested in some of your thoughts about, from what you've seen of the changes that this bill produced, any thoughts you may have about impacts to the broader market in that relationship between Florida and Bermuda.
And David, while you're waiting for either of those two invites, I would make two "oh, by the way" comments. One is, oh, by the way, we're going to continue working on insurance issues in the regular session, which for us starts March 7th. And it's a 60-day session that runs through early May. And also, I didn't mention at the opening that we've also done some things on bad faith. So for the lawyers in the room to require, that there be a finding by a court that is a condition precedent, so that if you don't have that finding in your allegations on a bad faith claim, you get bounced in a motion to dismiss. So we're not looking at having to litigate and the cost to litigate those claims when that first finding has not been made in the main case. And so I think those are some positive steps. Again, where we need to tweak that language or other language, we'll look at that and continue to be aggressive on Citizens and some of the other things we started in this bill.
Speaker, that's great news, and you've caused me to remember. I probably have a equivalent announcement to make that'll happen right about the time you kick off regular session in March. Here in Bermuda, we'll be hosting our annual Bermuda Risk Summit, and so we actually have quite a focus on Florida from a content perspective as well as a guest perspective. There will be several speakers coming in from Florida to be part of our annual risk summit, including some CEOs from some of the Florida-based companies and some other experts in the policy space and regulatory space. So we're really looking forward to that. And sorry that they're aligning on, I think we start on the 6th and session starts on the Tuesday the 7th. Otherwise, we'd invite you to come visit this lovely background behind me in person, Mr. Speaker.
I'd love to be there one day. And again, while we're waiting, well, go ahead. If we have any comments, or I'd really love to hear from folks as to what they think is gonna play out. What I was gonna say is we've also set up a select committee on hurricane resiliency and recovery, and part of the purpose behind that is to look at long-term mitigation strategies. The special session was about fixing the right here and now problems, but we're going to look at the things we need to do from a construction standpoint, from a avoiding repetitive loss standpoint. What are the things that we can do so that when hurricanes do come, we're built to withstand them and don't have major claims as a result. I mean, when I went down to Fort Myers, you'd see a building here that was built in the last 10, 15 years post Andrew that didn't look like it had a rainstorm, much less a hurricane, and then right beside it was rubble built pre-Andrew building code. And so we know that there are ways to really mitigate the scope of loss. And so we're certainly interested in things you can suggest as part of that to that select committee, which will be making recommendations to us throughout the year and into next year on what we can do to set ourselves up for being as resilient as possible.
Speaker, we might have a shy bunch today. I'm not seeing any questions yet, but I'm glad you brought up resiliency. I recall that just a few short years ago, the state of Florida implemented a new resiliency program where local governments in Florida could develop a resiliency plan and apply for matching funds from the state, which I thought was a really smart tactic. And I'm curious if you've started to see any communities taking up those opportunities for attracting state dollars. Has there been progress that you're seeing, or too soon to tell?
Some progress, but I think a lot of it is we do things and people just don't know what's happened, and they don't have the education to know that that this is available. And so I think it'll take some time for the word to get out. But the governor's spoken about it at numerous public events, and I think the word is beginning to come out that support is available. The other thing we did in the special was to provide funding in a number of areas to people that were hit by the hurricanes, beach money, different things. But some of that will go into, for example, on public infrastructure, raising pump stations, doing things that will have a resiliency component. So we spent upwards of, I think it was $751 million in the total package that we put together. And again, some of that will be toward resilient infrastructure and repairing our beaches, which of course protects property and roads and things that are insurable and insured. So I think that's a positive step as well.
Speaker, I will ask two more questions, and then we're not seeing them here, but one of my staffs is able to see them, so she's starting to feed me one or two. But I wanted to ask you about a comment I've heard over the years from my friends in the Bermuda reinsurance market. It was sort of a common theme around the cost and the difficulty of assessing risk in Florida related to lawsuits, was that we have a lot of experts here on the island that absolutely have the expertise to model storm risk, so they could assess the risk even for Florida for hurricanes in any given season. but they were finding it really challenging to assess the risk related to the perils of, well, call it a man-made risk of the lawsuit abuse that was going on, and the number of lawsuits, even some cases years and years after a storm event.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that perspective because it was held by many, and I think it speaks to just how much I personally appreciate, the fight that you and your colleagues fought to address AOB reform, and to finally address one-way attorney's fees to try to stem that particular part of the risk that was in Florida that was worse than anywhere else in the country, and hopes that the steps you've taken really start to turn the needle on that. The other question I was going to ask had to do with, you put, I believe it was $1 billion of state funds towards some additional reinsurance. And I know you mentioned it briefly, but do you want to speak to how long that lasts? And did I get the number right? Is it $1 billion for this current year?
Yeah, exclusive of premium, but that would be different than what we call our RAP program, which is in effect again this year. About 1.1 billion is in RAP, which is mandatory, so everybody takes it. And, is supposed to provide obviously some cushion there in the market. But this new program, which is abbreviated FORA, Optional Reinsurance Assistance, I think is what it stands for, is designed to have a market, I'll call it a market plus rate, so that we're not undercutting the private market, but we're providing a backstop as a last resort for those who cannot obtain reinsurance at that level. And of course, we've not gone all the way down to the level where the primary insurers are required to have their mandatory surplus and so forth. So that first dollar of reinsurance is not part of this program. It's higher up the tower, closer to just below, the cat fund layer, and so that's how we've got it set up. And it's temporary. The idea here is to finish our big systemic changes, which I think we've largely done. Not that we can't do any more, but we've largely, slayed the biggest dragons that were torching the insurance market, and allow that to kind of be taken up and get through this storm season and perhaps the following storm season until we see a fully healthy market, which we hope to see, within some short period of years after this bill takes effect or has taken effect.
Speaker Renner, we have our first question that's come through, and apologies for a little bit of a technical challenge, but you and I can't see them, but my team can. And so the first question has to do with, can you describe more about the relationship between Bermuda and Florida markets? What makes the relationship special, any synergies, et cetera? And I've got some thoughts on that, but you probably do as well. So I'll defer and let you take a first crack.
No, I should probably defer to you. Obviously, we know it's a as you called it at the outset, the capital of risk assessment and risk products like reinsurance. And so it's important in my mind that relationship only deepen in terms of the information flow. A lot of smart people in these companies that are putting their money at risk have spent a lot more time than I personally or our members or our staff have spent looking at how do we, and in particular, I think, how do we get more resilient? What do we do to bring down the cost of a claim for a given piece of property for a Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane that could be half or a third the cost that it would have been, but for those mitigation strategies. So that kind of thing I'm particularly interested in, and that's where I think the relationship needs to continue to be very much. You guys need to let us know where you are, what you think has changed, what hasn't changed, what your challenges are, what the opportunities are, and significantly, what can we do at the legislative level, including a budgetary level, to get Florida in as good a spot as possible, both to induce people, private investors into the market, but also to get some control around what the costs look like in the event of a storm. We won't stop storms, but We certainly have become far more resilient with our building code change as the one that sticks out. But are there other things we can do around storm surge or other things that will mitigate loss generally?
Well, Speaker, I have just one or two thoughts to share with our audience about the importance and the significance of the special relationship between Bermuda and Florida. And one, it happened, I was here in Bermuda in Hamilton when Ian hit Florida. And as you know, Speaker, I lived in Southwest Florida for a number of years. And, it was tough to be watching those images of the devastation of a community I lived in and loved and still had many friends and even some family in. But what was really neat in all the bad of destruction here in Bermuda, I had friends in the reinsurance market that were awake immediately after the storm hit and working through the week and the weekend, paying claims, getting needed resources immediately to Florida, to insurance companies that they work with, so that the insurance companies could start helping their customers and their clients and their communities get back on their feet. And so that's one really important part of the relationship. The other is to put it in sort of real terms. We've seen reports here that Bermuda, when all is said and done, will pay out roughly 25% of the insured losses in Florida for this storm season with Ian and Nicole. And so I think, that speaks to that strength of being partners that are there for each other in good times and in bad. Those are my thoughts. And Speaker, we have a second question that's come in that we may need an insurance expert for, which I don't know that I qualify for, but we have a question asking about how do we see parametric insurance shaking out as catastrophic events in Florida increase over time?
Yeah, I guess that's to me, and you're going to have to help me out a little bit with my terminology.
Yeah, as I said, we may need an insurance expert on this one, and I know I don't qualify.
I've learned a lot in the last 30 days, but I haven't learned everything. I've seen the term, but help me out with parametric is what that's saying there.
Mathematical or statistical analysis. I guess it's the probability of additional catastrophic events.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to, I'm a firm believer that the history of humankind has been that we have the ability to technologically innovate and become, I'll use the term resilient in this context, ahead of whatever nature and life throws at us. We've done that on a number of fronts where people predicted, people would starve. David Malthus back in the 19th century, that we wouldn't be able to produce enough agricultural products and to feed people based on increases in population, and populations increased multifold since his prediction. And of course, we have more food supply than we've ever had before. And I think the same can be true for hurricanes and storms. It's about, just building stronger. And so these storms can roll through and roll out, and apart from down trees and that type of thing, which we obviously have a challenge to harden. Homes are just going to be less prone to catastrophic damage from catastrophic storms because we built a lot stronger and done things smartly. And back to the storm surge piece, the other part of that tour down in Fort Myers is where Ian came ashore, is that you see people that are on one side of the street, high ground, and the other people are low ground, and devastating results in the one case, and really water came up to their steps but not in their house in the other, and they're good to go. Very minimal damage. And we need to get to a place where a big storm can roll through, and tree may fall on your roof, but it's not, your roof's not disappearing, your walls are not caving in. And there's certainly every reason to believe that as time goes by and materials get stronger and our construction gets smarter, that we can do that in a way that makes us not immune, but largely much more insurable against those kinds of threats.
Speaker, for my 2 cents, I think from what I've seen here in the risk capital of the world is, the modeling is very, very good. And as I said before, the expertise here in Bermuda can go a long way towards modeling the cost for certain types of weather risk, including hurricanes. And I think you've taken a lot of the right steps this session to reduce some of the risk that's more difficult to model, like the lawsuit abuse. Then over time, if forecasts prove out that there are more storms and the storms that hit us are perhaps more intense, I just want to applaud what you and the legislature and the governor are doing in terms of resiliency and strengthening, because I think the more we take steps in that direction, the better off Florida's coastal communities and even in some cases inland communities will be. And so I guess that's my short answer to the question about the parametric insurance impacts. Should there be more storms and more impactful storms in the future? Is hopefully we're building a Florida that's ready for it.
Yeah, what we should see over time is even if storms are increasing by, let's say, 20%, that our resiliency is increased by 30 or 40%, so that even if storms get more severe and more frequent, the total claims cost goes down. That's much more easier said than done, but that should be the goal, to really make it where we're built for what we're going to face.
Speaker, I'll give one maybe additional call. If anybody else has any questions, please put them in the comments section. But I also want to be respectful of your time, sir. You've been nice to be with us for
any thoughts coming back the other way? Any comments on what you think, to the extent people have had a chance to take a look at what this means or what they think the long term is for reinsurance market generally, or reinsurance's view of Florida specifically is welcome.
Speaker, you certainly have my commitment to, I'll be all ears for those types of comments through the holidays and on into early next year. And certainly we'll learn a lot as we have our annual risk summit first week of March. As I'm picking up thoughts and comments, I've pledged to get that back to you and your team and President Pasadomo and her team.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for your time. Everybody, have a great weekend and a happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you, Speaker. Delighted to have you with us. Great to see you, and happy holidays to you and your family as well.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.